Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for tuning back into Twisted Tales. It's been a little bit, and I do apologize. Just been busy with work and chilling. So, today's tale, we're going to dive right into Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. Now, Bernardo was also dubbed the Scarborough Rapist and the Schoolgirl Killer. So he teamed up with his wife, Karla Homolka, and they would be known as the Ken and Barbie Killers. Paul's dad, in the early days, was an Italian immigrant who made it big in the tile and marble industry. And Debbie and Dave were his brother and sister. Now, Bernardo was born August 27th, 1964, in Toronto, Ontario, while Homolka was born May 4th, 1970, in Port Credit, Ontario, Canada. Both had some pretty messed up fetishes, like recording each other raping their victims, so that would be like kind of a thing of power on both parts. And eventually, when you get that sense of power, you just keep going and try to recapture that feeling again. So Paul was the youngest child of Kenneth Walter and Marilyn Elizabeth Bernardo. Karla Leanne Homolka, she was also a serial killer who acted as like an accomplice and actively taking part in rapes and murders of at least 3 minors in Ontario, Canada. One victim being her own flesh and blood, her sister Tammy. And between the time frame in 1990 and 1992, she actually offered her younger sister's virginity as a gift to her then boyfriend Bernardo, just before around Christmas time there. And as a child growing up, you'd think there'd be like, a happy childhood kind of thing. But in life, things aren't always so glamorous behind closed doors. I mean, often witnessing her father getting drunk and fighting with her mother. Same with Paul Bernardo. Like, his father Kenneth sexually abused Paul's older sister Deborah in front of other family members, which would eventually land him in hot water with authorities. In turn, being charged with like voyeurism and pedophilia, his mother Marilyn would often hide and withdraw from the family, mainly due to her depression. Despite all the family's dysfunctional ways, Paul on the outside, he presented himself as a well-adjusted kid, being active in Boy Scouts and living his best life. Now, beneath all this over time, he developed sexual fantasies, very dark ones at that. In Bernardo's mind, he created anything he wanted, and there were no limits in his mind. Eventually he altered all that into real life, and he had thoughts of creating like a virgin farm where he'd be the ones breeding girls to rape and do with as he pleased. It's a pretty fucking dark mindset. So there's like a lot of stuff that go on endlessly in people's minds daily, but the dark and disturbed stuff should never cross the minds of most. Now, Karla, during her formative years, had enjoyed drawing and had a love for animals, eventually taking a part-time job at a local pet store. And she did very well in school, and her teacher stated she was a very bright student, and, very well liked, but was a little bit bossy towards her peers. Even though she claimed to love and adore animals, it was reported at one time she threw a friend's pet hamster out the window, and this resulted in its death. Usually people who kill or hurt animals have some sort of deep issues, or they're slowly practicing for something bigger down the line. Now, Karla in her teens enjoyed books, such as The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, and like most of us, she became infatuated with true crime. But her, to an extent, having interest in the occult, eventually trying to summon spirits with her friends, and, she thought up harsh ways to scare her friends and stuff like that. Now, even in high school, she was known as a nonconformist in regards to fashion. Didn't care what others thought of her, and she met a boy named Doug, and the two began to date, over time experimenting with drugs and sexual escapades. She often daydreamed and fantasized about crazy situations, kind of revolving her death, eventually, eventually going a little too deep into the fantasies. One time using a knife, in an attempt to cut herself. Bernardo also had some craziness in his years growing up as well. In 1981, after a fight with his parents, he was roughly about 16 years old. His mother angrily told him that he was the result of an affair, and that Kenneth was not his biological father. This totally had an effect on Paul's behavior towards his dear mother. He became repulsed by her, using slurs as, slut and whore, and she would often snap back at him, calling him a bastard from hell. He wasn't overly lucky in love with the ladies growing up either, most likely due to his domineering and aggressive behavior. His first girlfriend ended up leaving him for one of his best friends, so this angered Paul to a fucking point that he pretty much burned all her shit and set it on fire when it ended. His school days were a bit extreme for his relationships as well. He attended Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute, and then in '82, the University of Toronto Scarborough, UTSC. It's kind of funny how it's kind of a small world. The school that Paul attended was the same school that Canadian murderer Russell Williams attended. And eventually during school, Paul picked up a job working for a company called Amway, which is a multi-level marketing company. So this place kind of sells health and beauty, home care products, all that stuff. And it's pretty much the largest multi-level marketing company in the world as per its revenue. Now, the sales aspect of it deeply affected Paul. He bought a lot of recorded tapes and books. It was pretty much just, for the higher-ups to get rich and famous. That shit, right? Now, during college, he and his colleague used to frequent bars, so much like any of us did in school, right? They practiced pick-up lines on women that they met in bars and try to pick up dates, same as we all did. Now, Paul was a big fan of humiliating the girls that he dated in public by, just being the smug little asshole that he was, often engaging in aggressive sex, including rough anal intercourse, and uttering threats if they disclosed the ongoing abuse. Eventually, the violent and unstable behavior of Bernardo ended up being too much for his partners. In 1996, he was actually served with 2 restraining orders by 2 women after he made obscene phone calls to them. I'm sure Paul even used his good looks and ego to initially get what he wanted from these women. It just sucks that they couldn't see this guy for the psycho-egotistical maniac that he was. When he got them alone, he just totally fucked with them. And now they bear bad memories and trauma from this guy's casual beatings that he bestowed upon them. About May 1987, the suburb of Scarborough began to experience horrendous crimes. May 4th, for instance, early in the morning, a woman stepping off a bus started walking towards her parents' home when she was grabbed and brutally raped, and this woman was 21 years old. All of Bernardo's victims prior to meeting Karla remained anonymous, most of them being anywhere from 15 to 22 years of age. All of his attacks were known to be incredibly vicious and escalated more and more each attack. Some did fight him off, but a lot yelled for help to alert neighbors or others in the area to try to seek help. Now, usually the attacks occurred inside or outside victims' places of residence. He became one of many suspects, and eventually he got hauled in for questioning by investigators. Fucking idiot actually provided samples of DNA for analysis to test, but earlier on he was never charged with any of these crimes. And May 14th, 87, Bernardo committed the rape of a 19-year-old woman in the backyard of her parents' house. July 17th, 1987, he attempted rape of a young woman, viciously beating her. He quickly abandoned the attack when she began to fight back and fight for her life. September 29th, 1987, He attempted the rape and assault of a 15-year-old girl, breaking into her house, entering her bedroom, jumping on her back, and putting his hand over her mouth while threatening her with a knife. She had bruising on her face, and he bit the victim's ear. Only this, noise kind of came out and everything, and it was interrupted when her mother entered the room, which he then fled from the premises. A man named Anthony Hannemeyer was wrongly convicted of this crime back in '89, and he served a 16-month prison sentence. Eventually, he was to be exonerated, once Paul admitted to the crime or whatever. December 16th, 1987, he raped a 15-year-old girl. After this horrible act, the Toronto police started looking into shit. So they issued a warning to all the women in the city to be careful traveling at night or alone, and especially if they were riding the public transit buses. December 23rd, 1987, he committed rape of a 17-year-old girl while using a knife. He used this to terrorize her and indulge fear into his victims. So this would coin him the nickname the Scarborough Rapist. April 18th, 88, he viciously attacked a 17-year-old girl. May 25th, 88, a policeman was checking out a bus station, or kind of like a bus shelter, and he seen Bernardo, and he noticed he was hiding under a tree, and he started to pursue him on foot, but Paul was able to take off and escaped. It's just too bad that the officer couldn't have caught him. I mean, it would just put an end to all this senseless crimes caused by him. All Paul wanted to do was just fulfill his greasy fucking needs. Imagine being so close to ending this case, and the fault that you'd feel knowing that he skipped right past you. It's just definitely fueled the cop to help assist his case going further, I would say. May 30th, 1988, he raped a Mississauga, Ontario woman about 40 kilometers southwest from Scarborough. She was 18 years old. October 4th, 88, he attempted a rape in Scarborough, where his victim fought him off. He stabbed her twice in the thigh and buttocks, and she required 12 stitches. November 16th, 88, he raped an 18-year-old woman in her backyard. November 17th, police received a lot of reports of rape and attempted rape, and they formed a task force to capture the Scarborough Rapist. December 27th, 88, he attempted to rape a girl, but she ended up yelling to a neighbor, and he ended up getting chased off. And June 20th, 1989, he attempted the rape of a young woman, but she fought and screamed, so this alerted neighbors, and he fled with scratches on his face from the girl defending herself. And August 15th, 1989, he raped a 22-year-old woman. Back to November 21st, 1989. He had the rape of a 15-year-old girl he'd seen at a bus shelter. December 22nd, 1989, raped a 19-year-old woman. May 26th, 1990, he raped a 19-year-old woman, and she remembered her attacker vividly. So this recollection kind of allowed police to create a computer portrait, and they released it 2 days later and publicized it all over the Toronto and the surrounding areas. Now, July 1990, 2 months after police received tips that Bernardo actually resembled the rapist, he was brought in for questioning. Now, from May to September, police gathered up DNA samples from about 130 suspects. And regarding the 2 tips they just received that pretty much just fingered Bernardo, one tip being from a bank employee, the second tip being from a woman named Tina Smirnis. She was actually the wife to one of the Smirnis brothers, and the Smirnis brothers were Bernardo's best friends. She told police that Bernardo had been taken in before for rape investigations. This was back in '87, and about his frequent sex life, and that he talked about rough sex. So they interviewed Bernardo November 20th, 1990, for about 35 minutes. He even volunteered, to give them DNA samples, which he already gave them before. And when they asked why he thought he was being questioned about the rapes, he just told police, it's kind of just a resemblance thing. And apparently, police took the credibility of him over Smyrna's and let him go free. I mean, that's one big clusterfuck if I ever heard one. And we'll switch over to Karla here, just for a moment. Now, she had her part-time gig at the pet shop, as I mentioned earlier in our tale. So, after her graduation back in '88, she was hired on by Thorold Veterinary Clinic to begin working as a vet tech assistant. Now, then after some time, assuming that she learned a bit, because she was smart, and she picked up things rather quickly, she went and took a similar job at Martinsdale Animal Clinic. It was there that she would learn about the different kinds of medicine, and would later use these meds by stealing them and, using in her future crimes with Paul. Now, Paul and Karla had met about 2 years earlier in '87. She was visiting Scarborough for a pet store conference, and the two eventually hit it off quite well. They had an immediate attraction to each other. He was 23 and she was 17. They ended up having sex that same night, even with their friends being present. Kind of like from then on, the sparks flew, and Bernardo would try to visit Karla twice a week. So he ever slowly started manipulating her and taking control of her life, kind of like a day-by-day thing, advising her, how to dress, how to be stylish, how to eat, and what she should believe. He often belittled her, by calling her fat and ugly, and Karla became quite submissive to it, kind of encouraging his sexual behavior. Now, unlike Paul's previous girlfriends, when Paul had found out she wasn't a virgin when they first met, it upset him to no end, and the couple had a few choice words about this situation, and eventually this blew off. It's blew over with the couple, right? Now, I'll continue on with the Skullgirl murders here for a bit. 1990, Bernardo has lost his job as an accountant and started hitting up the cigarette smuggling trade. So he smuggled across the U.S. and Canadian border. So he was pretty charming yet arrogant, and this is kind of when he met Karla's family. They were none the wiser to Bernardo's criminal activities. I mean, by this time, him and Karla were pretty much engaged, and why would any family try to find fault in a guy that made her daughter so happy? Even though underneath Paul, there was just like some evil deed inside him, right? And Karla and Paul both shared very sick fucking fantasies. Over time, Bernardo became kind of bored with Karla, and he began to turn his sick-ass desires elsewhere, kind of pointing in the direction of Karla's younger sister, 15-year-old Tammy. Now, you'd think that someone would be fucking outraged at, advances or sexual comments being made to someone else other than your spouse, but Karla was pretty fucking twisted, and actually encouraged his desires, eventually giving in to her husband's urges. Now, both of them had thought of a plan, and she told Paul that she wanted him to have her little sister's virginity as a Christmas present. And now the wheels started, turning in Bernardo's head, and he was allowed to unleash all the crazy fuckery that he eventually got locked up for. Now, Bernardo spent long periods of time with Karla's family, pretty much living there. He became obsessed with Karla's sister over time, peeking into her bedroom windows, sneaking in her room to jerk off, while she slept. Just pretty crazy shit. And Karla eventually helped him by breaking her sister's blinds in her window to help him gain access to her room. Now, July 24th, 1990, as the rest of the family were asleep, Karla had laced her sister's spaghetti sauce earlier in the night with crushed Valium pills. So she stole those pills from the animal shelter she worked at. And Tammy, a little later on, became unconscious. Karla took a halothane soaked cloth. Now, halothane's kind of like a volatile anesthetic. It's used mostly in major surgeries. So it's like a clear and heavy colorless liquid. Bernardo then began to rape Tammy as Karla sat and watched. This act only lasted about a minute because Tammy started to begin regaining consciousness, and they ended the whole plan right then and there. Now, December 23rd, 1990, Karla and Bernardo administered sleeping pills in a rum and eggnog drink that they gave to Tammy, and she lost consciousness once again. So, soon to be undressed by them both, she had the rag over the nose and the mouth by her sister, and the parents were asleep upstairs. So they videotaped themselves raping Tammy in the family's basement until Tammy began to vomit and eventually stopped breathing. So Karla held her down and tried to clear her throat, but she failed to do so. She wasn't revived. Now, Bernardo and Karla began to panic, and they put her clothes back on, and they started to clean up any evidence of the crime. Now, this attempt on Tammy, the dose of drugging was too much. After the first rape attempt being a failure, they used more drugs this time. And Tammy woke up due to the small dose of drugs last time, and they had to make sure that, she wouldn't wake up during the second attempt of rape. So once everything was cleaned up to its original state, they called 911. Tammy was pronounced dead hours later at St. Catherine's General Hospital. Even though Bernardo and Karla were kind of seen messing around earlier, vacuuming and doing laundry in the middle of the night, and the chemical burn that was left on Tammy's face from the poisoned rag, it was noted by the coroner of the regional municipality of Niagara that he had accepted the couple's version of events, and Tammy's death was ruled accidental as a result of choking on her own vomit after consuming too much alcohol. Now, relief kind of started to set in for the couple, as they both pretty much just gotten away with an unplanned murder. They laughed and joked at Tammy's funeral. Bernardo began rubbing Tammy's hair as they put a photo of themselves next to her body before Tammy was buried. And, even after her death, they would role play, and Karla would pretend to be her sister Tammy, and they would have sex on Tammy's bed to fulfill their fucking weird-ass fantasies. So, Paul and Karla eventually moved out of the family home to give the parents time to grieve, and they moved over to Port Dalhousie. Now, June 15th, 1991, it was kind of early in the morning, and Paul was out stealing license plates near Burlington just to be able to travel while smuggling cigarettes. He came across a 14-year-old named Leslie Mahaffey. Later on in the night, they conversed a bit, and Paul found out she was kicked out of her house for missing curfew because she had to go attend a friend's wake. And he made a story of going to break into a neighbor's house, and Leslie asked him if he had any cigarettes because she wanted one. And, they were just bullshitting for a bit, so they walked back to his car, and he blindfolded her, forced her into the vehicle, and he headed to their house in Dalhousie. He informed Karla that they would soon have their next victim. Now, once poor Leslie was inside, the couple began to record themselves torturing her, playing Bob Marley and David Bowie in the background, just setting the mood for their crazy shit. Now, Bernardo said to Leslie, "You're doing a great job, Leslie. A damn good job. The next 2 hours are going to determine what I do to you. And right now, you're scoring perfect." As the assault continued on through the night, she eventually screaming out in pain, still blindfolded and bound. She begged for them to stop and let her go, but they just kept up humiliating and sodomizing her throughout the night. She eventually told Bernardo that her blindfold was slipping, and this increased the possibility that she could identify them if they decided to let her live. The next day, he gave her a lethal dose of halcyon and then strangled her. He kept the body in the basement, and the next day they had joined Karla's parents for dinner at the family house, kind of nothing happened at all. Now, after the dinner party, Bernardo and Karla dismembered Mahaffey's body, encasing each body part of her remains into cement. And he actually bought all this the following day at a hardware store. So, that's motive right there for you. He cut each body part up with a circular saw that he got from his grandfather, and they made numerous trips to Lake Gibson to dump the cement blocks. Eventually, one of the blocks weighed 200 pounds, and the couple didn't have the ability to sink that. So it laid near the shore and was eventually found on June 29th, 1991. Bernardo and Karla's wedding day, actually. It's kind of just shitty. You're getting married, and a father and son on that day too were fishing, and they contacted police, and the investigation was underway. And Leslie had been identified by her dental records. And even like a few days before the wedding, June 7th, 1991, Karla invited a teenager that she had met at work to their new home. They eventually drugged her, and she passed out from a laced drink. Now, Karla was happy about things, telling Bernardo it was a surprise wedding gift, and they filmed it as they raped her. And the next day, the victim, kind of known as Jane Doe, woke up nauseous and had no indication that she was raped. And going back to the marriage there, you know, they married. They had a wicked lavish wedding, and it was actually at the historic church in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And they had everything from like white horses in a carriage, champagne, dinner for 150 people. All of them sat around eating veal stuffed pheasant. I mean, no expenses were paid by this fuckbag Bernardo. And he controlled every aspect of the wedding. Details going down to like Karla's dress. I mean, that was $2,000 US. And in Canadian currency, that equals out to be $2,677. And he took care of like all the hairstyles, and even going so far as to not allow the minister to say husband and wife. It had to be man and wife. And even just putting this front on for a family, he still kind of pulled that controlling card, because that's just who he was. After getting married, I mean, it didn't slow anything down, and they just continued on with their crimes of rape and torture, and fulfilling their sexual needs. In August 1991, Jane Doe was actually invited over again, and the couple tried to mirror the same night when Tammy had died. Jane Doe at one point had also stopped breathing while being raped. Eventually, she was able to be revived, and Karla had to call 911 back and inform them that the crisis was averted, and the ambulance that was sent there was en route to another call. So we'll talk about the death of Kristen French here. So this would be April 16th, 1992. Bernardo and Karla drove through St. Catharines looking for potential victims, passing a school, the Holy Cross Secondary School, where they spotted 15-year-old Kristen, walking around. So they pulled into the parking lot of a nearby church, the Grace Lutheran Church. So Karla exited the vehicle as a distraction, carrying a map and asking for help with directions. When Kristen looked at the map, Bernardo attacked her from behind, forcing her into the front seat of the vehicle at knife point. All while Karla pulled Kristen's hair from the back seat to stop her from escaping. When Kristen failed to arrive home from school, her parents began to worry, and they suspected foul play. So they called the local police department, and 24 hours later, a team was put together from Niagara Regional Police. They searched the girls' school route. They walked around asking witnesses who actually seen the abduction take place from different locations. They actually also found a shoe of Kristen's in the parking lot. Over Easter weekend, the couple videotaped themselves torturing, raping, and sodomizing French, force-feeding her large quantities of alcohol, so she would be kind of submissive for Bernardo. Now, the next day, they murdered Kristen French and carried on about their day, going to a family Easter dinner at Karla's house. Bernardo had strangled French, while Karla looked on. This was April 19th. Her nude body was found April 30th, 1992 in a ditch in Burlington, about 45 minutes from St. Catharines. Her body had been washed, and her hair was cut off, possibly kept for a trophy. Before she was killed, she became very confrontational and angered Bernardo to no end, calling him a bastard, just like his mother did in an argument they had long ago. So Kristen also told him, "I don't know how your wife can stand to be around you." She stood up to that piece of shit, and she had really good energy for that. So that was a really brave woman. Police got a hold of Bernardo and Homolka, questioning them several times in connection with the Scarborough rapist investigation, the death of Tammy, and Paul's stalking of numerous women previously. So on May 12th, 1992, Paul was kind of half-assed investigated by a police constable who decided he was an unlikely suspect, even though he'd been looked into a few times prior for rape cases. I mean, this is where the Green Ribbon Task Force comes into play. They created this task force to investigate the murders of Mahaffey and French. It was formed by the Ontario government with a base of operations, setting up phone hotlines and to try to get tips for the case. Now, during the time police were investigating the couple, they had applied to have their names changed to Teal, a name that Bernardo actually got from a villain in a 1988 movie, Criminal Law. And the guy in the movie was actually a serial killer. Around the end of May, Bernardo's friends and acquaintances began to report Bernardo to police as the possible murder and rape suspect. Now, December 27th, 1992, Bernardo couldn't keep his anger and rage to himself, and finally showed his true colors to his wife Karla. He ended up beating her senseless with a flashlight. He hit her on her face, head, and limbs, and she didn't announce the beating to anyone, and she kindly returned to her job on January 4th, 1993, and she was severely bruised. And her co-workers were worried and skeptical about her story of being in a car accident. The co-workers actually called up Karla's parents, and her parents went and tried to rescue her from trouble with Bernardo. So the next day, she went back to the house to get some personal belongings, and was then taken to St. Catharines General Hospital for her injuries, which were documented, and she gave a statement claiming to be a battered wife, filing charges against her boyfriend Paul, who was later arrested, but then released soon after on his own recognizance. Karla soon moved in with her relatives in Brampton, Ontario. Now, 26 months later, after a DNA sample provided by Bernardo had matched the Scarborough rapist crimes, police put him on a 24-hour watch, and they began to question his wife Karla. Now, Metro Toronto Sexual Assault Squad interviewed her on February 9th, 1993. And she didn't focus on, the suspicions of Paul, but more focused on the abuse that he had recently inflicted on her. So later on that night, after being grilled by police interviews, she kind of opened up to her relatives that she moved in with, admitting her part in the crimes with Paul, and that he was indeed the Scarborough rapist. And she actually told them about her involvement in the rape and murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and how it was all recorded by them. So I'm guessing by this time, Karla was kind of at a low point, and she just wanted things to end with Bernardo and all the shit they were involved in. So Karla's confession had led investigators to reopen the investigation into Tammy's death. So February 11th, 1993, Karla had met with a lawyer named George Walker, and George fought for Karla's full immunity in exchange for her cooperation, and then she was eventually placed under 24-hour surveillance. Now, a little bit back, I mentioned that the couple was wanting to change their names, which was eventually approved on February 13th, 1993. Now, Karla's lawyer met with Murray Siegel. He was director of the Crown Criminal Law Office. Mentioning the videotapes of the rapes, Siegel told Walker that full immunity for Tammy was not possible, due to the fact that she was involved in the crimes herself. Now, the Green Ribbon Task Force, along with Metro Sexual Assault Squad detectives, brought Bernardo in and arrested him on February 17th, 1993. So the search warrants that were present, they kind of contained limitations, because the link to the murders were like a little bit weak. So, kind of meaning that no evidence that was not expected and documented in the warrant was permitted to be removed from the premises. All videotapes found had to be viewed in the house, damage to the house had to be minimal, and police couldn't destroy or tear down any walls to search for hidden tapes. Obviously, over time, they updated these warrants, and the police search lasted about 71 days. So the only tape that was actually recovered was one with a short segment of Karla performing oral sex on the Jade Doe victim. Now, the reason they only found one tape was because Bernardo's lawyer, Ken Murray, received a call from Bernardo in jail that the rape tapes were hidden in an upstairs bathroom light fixture on the ceiling. Now, he hid these tapes from investigators, and then he eventually resigned. Now, Paul's new lawyer, John Rosen, ended up giving these tapes directly to police. Now, May 5th, 1993, Karla's lawyer, Mr. Walker, was informed that the government was offering Karla a 12-year sentence plea bargain. So she had 1 week to think about it and accept it. If declined, she would be charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and other punishments for some other crimes. The lawyer had accepted the deal that was made, as did Karla, and it kicked in on May 14th, 1993. It was finalized, and she started to give her statement to authorities. Now, when the trial started, there was a publication ban in effect. This was just kind of like to protect Bernardo's rights to a fair trial, and this was imposed on July 5th by Francis Kovacs of the Ontario Court of Justice. And the trial soon hit, and Bernardo was tried for the murders of Leslie and Kristen. The trial included detailed testimony from Karla and all the videos that they recorded of the rapes. He tried to testify that the deaths had been accidental, and he tried turning the tables and blaming his wife Karla, claiming that she was the actual killer. Bernardo was convicted on a shit ton of offenses: 2 first-degree murders, 2 aggravated sexual assaults, and got sentenced to life in prison without parole for at least 25 years. He was also deemed a dangerous offender, which made him very unlikely to be released again. Over time, Karla's plea bargain began to be criticized by all fucking Canadians. And since Bernardo's lawyer hid the tapes that were actually crucial evidence, prosecutors said they would never have offered her a plea bargain if they watched them to begin with. Ken Murray withheld the tapes for roughly 17 months and was acquitted of obstruction of justice. He then faced a disciplinary hearing by the Law Society of Upper Canada. Now, finally behind bars, Paul Bernardo was kept in segregation unit of the Kingston Penitentiary for his own safety, being constantly harassed and attacked by other inmates. He was punched in the face over time after returning from a shower in 1996, and in June 1999, 5 inmates tried to storm his segregation cell, and police had to use a riot squad and tear gas to clear them out. February 21st, 2006, the newspaper The Toronto Star had done some reporting about Bernardo, and, saying that he kind of admitted to 10 other attacks on women, mostly in 1986, a year before his spree as a Scarborough rapist. And police authorities also suspect him in other crimes, including a string of rapes in Amherst, New York, the drowning of Terry Anderson, but none of this has been acknowledged. And in 2006, Bernardo kind of gave a prison interview, claiming to be reformed, all that shit, joking that he'd make a good parole candidate. Eventually he became eligible to petition a jury for early parole in 2008. This would be under the faint hope clause. And because he committed the murders and rape before the 1997 Criminal Code amendment, but this didn't fucking happen. So in 2015, he applied for day parole in Toronto. Now, a lawyer of one of the victims said it's very unlikely that he'd be released in any form due to the dangerous offender status. Now, again in 2015, he self-published a book called A Mad World Order. It was a very violent, fictional 631-page ebook on Amazon, but by November 15th, it was a wicked bestseller on Amazon. but was eventually yanked off the website due to public outcry. And in 2018 October, Bernardo was set for trial for possession of a shank weapon while he was locked up. Charges were dropped because there was no reasonable probability of conviction. Paul then became eligible for parole in February 2018, but was denied day and full parole by the Parole Board of Canada. In his next hearing, this took place on June 22nd, 2021, the presiding judge turned down the application in less than an hour. And finally, 2023, he's now spent over a decade at Millhaven Institution. Then he was eventually transferred to Macasa Institution, which is a medium security prison in Quebec. So this drummed up all sorts of fucking controversy, and no reason of the transfer was ever given to the public, and is currently being reviewed by the Federal Prison Services. Down the line, there was also a law enforcement review that eventually came into play too. This happened after his 1995 conviction. Archie Campbell was appointed by the Ontario government to check out the roles played by police during their investigation. He found that a lack of coordination, communication, and cooperation by police and other judicial system shit had led to, a serial predator falling through the cracks. Campbell's recommendation for this was an automated case management system to be used in investigations of homicide and sexual assaults. Now, Ontario is the only place with this case management network, and since 2002, I believe all municipal police services, plus Ontario Police, they have access to this, and it's actually now called Power Case. Shortly after the 1995 court testimony against Bernardo, Homolka had returned to Kingston Prison for Women. Now, her mother Dorothy started to have health issues and began to suffer annual breakdowns around Thanksgiving and Christmas time. The collapses she suffered had been so severe that she had to be hospitalized for months at a time. Just assuming it was all the stress and shit from the case and what her daughter and her fucking boyfriend they had done, while they were in their house and everything else. I mean, everything played a factor in that, health issues, I would say. Now, while being incarcerated in Kingston, Homolka began doing courses in sociology. This was done through nearby Queen's University. She would be required to pay all fees associated, and in a letter she wrote to Stephen Williams, she did receive a little bit of financial assistance, and later graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from Queen's. And in 1997, she was moved from Kingston in the summertime to Joliet Institution, which is a medium security prison in Quebec. And in 1999, a Toronto Star reporter named Michelle Shepard came into possession of copies of Karla's transfer to Mason Therese Casgrain, which is a halfway house. And it was actually in the area of local schools, and this didn't sit well with the public. So the courts issued a publication ban on the leak of information, kind of to get a fair trade of events that no one would find out what Karla's plans were. Karla later sued the government after her transfer to the Montreal halfway house was denied. And in 2001, Homolka was transferred to St. Anne-des-Plaines Institution, a maximum security prison in Quebec. And in 2008, Karla wrote a letter of apology to her family, continuing to blame Bernardo for her involvement and writing that he wanted me to get sleeping pills from work, and he threatened me physically and emotionally, and he abused me, when I refused to assist anything in this. And she also wrote that she tried so hard to save her, but she couldn't. Usually, a lot of inmates want to apply for parole at any first given opportunity, but Karla didn't even attempt this, as she was deemed a high risk to reoffend, and also being denied release 2/3 of the way through her sentence. 2004, CBC had noted that the National Parole Board ruled Karla must stay in prison for her whole sentence, and that she might be, might commit another violent crime. The parole board mentioned that she had made progress towards her rehabilitation, but there was only one concern regarding a relationship with a convicted murderer named Jean-Paul Gerbet, and they reprimanded Karla, stating that you have secretly undertaken an emotional relationship with another inmate, and by evidence gathered, the relationship had become rapidly sexual. As a result, it was decided that she stay in prison. But while in prison, she participated in every treatment program that had been suggested by prison authorities. That wasn't until she was asked to participate in a course designed for male sex offenders. She refused to do this because she was neither male or a convicted sex offender. In a 2-day hearing in June 2005 by Judge John R. Berlow had ruled that Karla, upon her upcoming release on July 4th, 2005, that she would still pose a risk to the public at large. So certain restrictions were put into play. Number one, that she was to tell police her home address, work address, and who she lived with. Number two, she was to notify police as soon as the above changed. 3, notify police of any change in her name. 4, if she planned to be away from her home for more than 48 hours, she had to give a 72-hour notice. Number 5, she could not contact Paul Bernardo, the families of Leslie Mahaffey, or Kristen French, or the woman known as Jane Doe, or any other violent criminals. Number 6, she was forbidden to be with people under the age of 16 and not to consume drugs other than prescription medicine. 7, continue with therapy and counseling. Number 8, required to submit a DNA sample to police. And on June 21st, 2012, a Canadian journalist named Paula Todd published a 40-page ebook that kind of revealed that Karla moved to Guadeloupe and changed her name to Leanne Bordialis. She was married to her brother's lawyer, Thierry Bordalis, and has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Paula Todd wrote that she spent time there, here and there, and she had a visit with Karla, and she seemed to be an excellent mother. Now, after all this visit shit, Karla actually phoned her lawyer and ceased no contact with Paula Todd.
Canada's notorious schoolgirl killer is an occasional volunteer at a Montreal school. City News has learned Karla Homolka has been in the classroom and on a field trip. Dominic Fazioli tells us why the school didn't do a background check.
Karla Homolka is one of Canada's most notorious criminals. Along with her then-husband Paul Bernardo, she played a role in the sex killings of 2 schoolgirls and her 15-year-old sister. Since her release from prison, parents have opposed her presence outside schools, including her children's schools. Last year, there was a backlash in Chateauguay, and now she's facing resistance in Montreal's NDG district. Can I talk to you for a second? Since September, Homolka has been a regular fixture at Greaves Adventist Academy, a private Christian school.
We don't want her there. We don't want her in the school.
Lily is a concerned parent at the NDG school. She doesn't want her face shown. She says Homolka does more than just drop off and pick up her kids. She claims Homolka occasionally volunteers at the school. Several sources connected with the school say that on March 22nd, Homolka helped supervise a group of kindergarten students during a field trip to the Montreal Science Center.
How would you feel knowing that your child is interacting with a person who's a serial killer? It's not right.
Those same sources say Homolka has even been inside the school from time to time. She's even brought her dog into the classroom for children to pet.
She's not supposed to be there. Why is she allowed to be in the school?
Lily says many parents have spoken to the school principal, but nothing has changed. We spoke with Homolka last week. Karla, can I ask you a question? Do you volunteer or work at the school?
Who are you?
You know who I am.
No, I don't know who you are. Who are you?
I'm a news reporter.
Well, good for you.
By law, before anyone can have regular contact with children in Quebec schools, they are required to undergo a criminal background check. Our questions to the school about if this protocol was followed were not answered. But the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Canada, who runs the school, says the school board was fully aware of who Homolka is and that she is not a regular volunteer and can never be alone with children in school or churches.
My lawyer will be in contact with you.
Thank you, Karla. A statement sent to us Tuesday afternoon reads in part, the Quebec Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and the administration of Greaves Adventist Academy are committed to providing quality education and enriching learning experiences to its students. While we work through the concerns stated by parents and other stakeholders, we welcome those associated with the school to contact the Quebec Conference Office of Education.
The Correctional Service of Canada says its commissioner has ordered another review of the decision to move serial killer and rapist Paul Bernardo from a maximum to medium security prison. The move comes after widespread public and political outrage from the highest levels of government.
The decision to transfer Paul Bernardo from a maximum security institution to a medium security institution is both shocking and incomprehensible, given how horrific the crimes were that he perpetrated on women and young girls.
As a result, Minister Marco Mendicino says he personally spoke with the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada to express his anger over Bernardo's transfer from a maximum security institution near Kingston to the medium security institution northwest of Montreal.
She assured me that she understood. She also assured me that she was going to be reviewing the matter.
In a statement, the Correctional Service of Canada says the review will assess if the move was appropriate, evidence-based, and considerate of Bernardo's victims, adding, "We understand that Canadians want to know the reasons for such transfers. Security classifications and transfers are based on risk to public safety, escape risk, an offender's institutional adjustment, and other case-specific information, such as psychological risk assessments." Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's leaving it to Mendicino to figure out why this happened and what the government will do about it.
I fully and totally understand how shocked and appalled so many Canadians are.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is among the opposition leaders calling on the government to take immediate action.
He should be in a maximum security institution. The government should review any powers it has to reverse this ridiculous decision.
Premier Doug Ford not mincing words in his statement, quote, "Paul Bernardo should rot in a maximum security prison for the rest of his miserable existence." Bernardo was convicted in the murders of teenagers Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey in the early 1990s and convicted of manslaughter in the death of his wife Karla Homolka's sister, Tammy Homolka. Now, the lawyer for the French and Mahaffey families says the Correctional Service of Canada refused to answer questions on the reason behind the move, citing Bernardo's right to privacy.
I guess that pretty much wraps things up. Bernardo still rots in jail for the time being. Karla served her time, and the world knows of the, horrific crimes orchestrated by both. And hopefully the public can take measures to try and keep themselves safe, if it, ever attacked in a bad situation or anything. So hopefully they'll be able to prevent this or, shit from happening to anybody. But now people are more aware, and you can't trust really anybody. But I love you guys. Stay awesome and enjoy your upcoming work week. Just thanks for tuning in to Twisted Tales, and just give us a like on fucking Spotify, and I'll be back with some more tales here soon enough. Awesome. You guys take care.
Twisted Tales.